I turned 35 on a Thursday. Not a milestone year exactly, but still a birthday. One you'd expect your wife to acknowledge in some kind of personal, familiar way. Valerie usually made a thing of it, nothing dramatic, but warm. Last year, she baked a spice cake from my mom's old recipe. The year before that, she planned a weekend in Bend where we hiked, drank too much craft beer, and came back sore and happy. I was never big on birthdays, but Valerie was. That's why this year, when she told me to just come home, I have something planned, I figured it'd be something low-key. Mate. Maybe dinner, a nice bottle of the rye I like, a walk with the dog, Rory, through Silver Falls' sleepy streets. But as soon as I turned into our driveway, I knew something was off. First, the cars, too many of them, crammed along the curb like it was a block party. I recognized maybe 1 or 2 plates. The rest, completely unfamiliar. Second, the lights. The whole house was lit up like a showroom. Valerie hated wasting electricity, used to call me out for leaving a bathroom light on. But tonight, everything glowed. I parked and sat in the car for a moment, engine off, keys in hand. My phone buzzed. A calendar notification. Dinner with Valerie Redheart, 6:30. I stared at it for a beat, then stepped out into the crisp March air. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the bass from a Sonos speaker thumped through the walls. Laughter rang out, light, musical, and way too much of it. The smell of perfume and hors d'oeuvres hit me immediately. I stepped in and blinked. People were everywhere. First, I thought I was in the wrong house. They filled the living room, the kitchen, the staircase. Faces I didn't know. Everyone dressed sharp, like this was some sort of networking mixer or launch party. Wine glasses clinked. Someone passed me with a tray of salmon crostini and nodded like I was staff. And then I saw her, Valerie, my wife of 6 years, in a deep green dress that hugged her like a second skin, heels I hadn't seen before, and her hair curled in soft waves the way she used to do it for weddings. Her smile lit up the whole room. Her arm, resting on the chest of a man standing close, maybe too close. I stopped walking. The noise seemed to dull around me. The man turned slightly, revealing the kind of face that stuck in your memory. Not because it was remarkable, but because it was confident, polished. Like he didn't know how to be awkward. Shane. I'd heard about him in passing. Shane from work. Shane who leads the Artwell account. Shane who used to work in Berlin. Casual mentions, always harmless, always footnotes. But I knew his name. Now he was here. In my house. At my wife's side. "Hey, the man of the hour," he said, lifting his glass like I was an old friend. His voice was smooth, like an ad voiceover. A few people turned to look at me. Valerie glanced my way, her smile still frozen on her face. "Happy birthday," she said, not moving. Her tone was polite, almost detached. I stood there, not sure how to respond. Shane clinked her glass. They both drank. No one handed me a drink. No one said my name. No one seemed to notice I was standing in the doorway, still wearing the same button-down I'd had on for court that morning. There wasn't a single banner, card, or candle with my name on it. I took a step back into the hall, scanning the room. There was a cake, but it was off to the side, no candles. The decoration said, "Celebrate," in generic gold foil. Some guy I didn't recognize was talking about crypto in my kitchen. Our dog Rory was nowhere in sight. For a second, I genuinely wondered if Valerie had forgotten it was my birthday. But no, that couldn't be it. She never forgot birthdays. Not mine, not hers, not even Rory's. Which meant, this party wasn't for me. She hadn't forgotten. She'd chosen. And I wasn't part of it. "Grayson," she said then, as if sensing my thoughts. She was walking toward me now, her tone shifting slightly. "I didn't think you'd be home so early." "So early?" I echoed. "You said 6:30. Her eyes flicked away. "Right?" She looked over her shoulder, as if checking to see who was watching. Her hand brushed mine for a second, a gesture I might have welcomed once, but now felt staged. Then she smiled that practiced smile and added, "Why don't you grab a drink?" I looked past her toward Shane, who had resumed his conversation with another guy in a blazer and no socks. Valerie followed my gaze, but didn't offer an explanation. Just turned and melted back into the crowd like I hadn't shown up at all. For the next hour, I drifted. I stood near the fireplace, petted someone's golden retriever I'd never seen before, heard snatches of conversation about scaling in Q3 and digital community growth. One woman asked me what I did. I told her I was an attorney. She nodded, unimpressed, and wandered off. Not one person asked about my birthday. No one sang. No candles. No gifts, at least none for me. I slipped upstairs to the bedroom at one point. My dress shoes were still in the closet, untouched. The watch Valerie gave me 2 years ago for Christmas was gone from its usual place. I found Rory hiding under the bed, anxious and panting. I sat beside him for a few minutes, scratching behind his ears, trying not to let it sink in, but it was already too late. When I came back downstairs, the energy had shifted. Valerie was dancing now. Just her and Shane swaying close. Her hand was behind his neck. His palm pressed against the small of her back, fingers splayed. They moved like no one else was in the room. Maybe they weren't. Maybe I wasn't. I didn't make a scene. I didn't pull her aside. I didn't confront Shane. I just stood there, invisible in my own house, surrounded by strangers and a celebration I hadn't been invited to, even though it was supposed to be for me. Eventually, I slipped out the back door and sat on the deck steps. The cold wood under me. The murmur of the party still audible. The sky a dull gray like it couldn't decide whether to clear or storm. I checked my phone. A few HBD man texts from friends who didn't know. One missed call from my sister. Nothing from Valerie. I stared at the empty screen for a while, then typed a quick reply to my sister. Yeah, long day. Thanks. Talk later. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just sat there letting the truth unfold in pieces. This wasn't a birthday party for me. It was a goodbye party I hadn't been told about yet. The morning after the party that wasn't for me, I sat at the kitchen table nursing a half-warm cup of coffee, watching Valerie move around like nothing had happened. She wore her navy blouse, the one with the small pearl buttons, and sipped her smoothie while scrolling through her phone. Calm, effortless, unreadable. Rory stayed curled up under the table near her feet, barely glancing at me. Did you get enough sleep? She asked, not looking up. Not really, I replied. That was it. She left 10 minutes later, said she had a client breakfast downtown. No goodbye kiss. Not even a touch on the shoulder. When the door shut behind her, the silence in the house felt personal. Not peaceful. Just cold. That's when it began to click, the timeline, the changes I had ignored, the pieces I had deliberately refused to connect. Her behavior hadn't shifted overnight. It had been unraveling for months, just subtly enough to gaslight me into doubting my instincts. I used to think I was imagining things. That it was stress from work. That we drifted a little like all couples do and we'd swing back. But the truth was I had seen the signs. I just chose not to acknowledge them until now. It started with the nights. A few months back, she began working late. Quarterly reviews, she said. New client in Portland. Sometimes she wouldn't get home until 10. Then it became a pattern 3 for nights a week. Once she came in just before midnight. I was already in bed pretending to be asleep. I heard her in the hallway whispering something into her phone, too quiet for me to hear the words, but an asterisk made enough to make me freeze. Then there was the perfume. Valerie always wore clean, subtle scents, white tea, lavender, citrus blends. But around January, she started wearing something new. Stronger. Muskier. It clung to her when she walked past me and lingered on our pillows. One night, I asked about it. Oh, this, she said. Got a sample from a client. Thought I'd try it. That was it. No warmth, no teasing. Just a half shrug and a quick turn of the shoulder as she walked into the bathroom. After that, the phone became her third hand. She never put it down. Not while we watched TV. Not when we ate. Not even during showers. It sat just outside the curtain on the sink, screen face down but unlocked, buzzing with silent notifications. I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen her open Instagram near me. Or text a friend where I could see. She used to read me funny tweets. Show me cat videos. Now, nothing. And the laptop? Password protected. Always shut. Once I asked to use it when mine was updating, and she said, just wait until yours is done. No hesitation, no eye contact. The same night, I caught her closing tabs when I walked in the room. Conversations dried up too. We used to talk about everything, work gossip, childhood memories, plans for the summer. But lately, every conversation hit a wall after 4 sentences. How was your day? Busy. Tiring. Want to order in? Whatever you want. And then, silence. We could sit in the same room for an hour and not say a word. At first, I chalked it up to fatigue. We were both busy. But then even our dog started acting different. Rory used to follow me everywhere. Sat by my desk, waited by the door when I came home. Yeah? He stayed with Valerie. Curled up by her feet on the couch. Slept at her side of the bed even when she wasn't home. I know dogs can sense things, energy, stress, moods. Part of me wondered if he knew before I did. One night, in February, I noticed her wedding ring was missing. We were watching a movie, some rom-com she'd picked, ironic in hindsight. I glanced down at her hand and saw bare skin where the gold band should have been. My heart stopped. "Where's your ring?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She looked down, blinked, and said, "Oh. I took it off earlier while cleaning. Must have forgotten to put it back on." Then she reached for a blanket and wrapped it around her hand. It should have been a warning siren. But I let it go. Told myself not to be that guy, the insecure, suspicious husband who starts fights over nothing. I didn't want to be that version of myself. But it wasn't nothing. It was a breadcrumb in a trail I had refused to follow. I started watching more carefully, taking mental notes. When Valerie came home, she smelled faintly of wine, even on Mondays. She'd smile at her phone, bite her lower lip like she was suppressing something giddy. She'd hum when walking up the stairs. Once, I heard her talking in the garage before she came in. I peeked through the curtain, just her car. No one else. But her smile lingered even after the door closed behind her. The strangest part? She seemed lighter, happier, freer. The way people look when they're just starting something new and exciting, except she wasn't starting anything. At least not with me. Meanwhile, I began shrinking in our own home. I stopped asking questions. Stopped initiating plans. Even physical touch faded. She used to reach for my hand when we walked the dog. Now she walked ahead. We hadn't been in * made in. I honestly couldn't remember. Maybe 2 months. Maybe more. One night, I touched her back while we were brushing our teeth, just a small gesture, and she flinched. Not dramatically. Just a quick pull away like she wasn't used to my hand anymore. I stood in the mirror, toothbrush frozen in my mouth, watching her move like a stranger beside me. That's when I knew, deep down, at a level you don't talk about at dinner parties, that I was being phased out. Slowly. Quietly. Without confrontation. She wasn't going to leave me in a storm. She was going to wait until I didn't even recognize the life we were living. Until I wouldn't be able to point to the moment things ended because it would have already happened without my consent. That realization sat with me for days. And instead of confronting her, I started observing more. Her smiles were always sharper around her phone. She dressed better on days she worked late. Her mood swung higher on Fridays. And worst of all, she never touched me in public anymore. Not in front of our friends. Not in restaurants. Not even the casual hand-to-back thing people do when they care without thinking about it. That touch was gone. One afternoon, I walked past our front hall mirror and barely recognized myself. I looked like a man on pause, tired, withdrawn, unsure of how he got here. So I did something strange. I took out my phone, opened the Notes app, and started writing down what I saw. Not feelings. Not theories. Just facts. Valerie home at 11:20 p.m., wine breath. No ring again, second time in 1 week. Phone in shower. Smiled at text and left room mid-sentence. Mentioned shame 3 times this week. Always casually. By the end of that week, the list was long enough that I had to scroll. By the next week, I had a name for what I was doing, documenting. Not for revenge. Not even for proof. Just for clarity. Because if I was going to be lied to, I wanted at least one honest thing, and that was my own record of the truth. Something real. Something mine. Because Valerie wasn't mine anymore. Not really. I never imagined I'd be the kind of man who checks up on his wife. The kind who peers through windows like he's casing his own home. But there I was on a Tuesday afternoon, standing beneath the shadow of our neighbor's red maple, staring through the side window of our veranda, heart in my throat. It was supposed to be just another workday. Valerie told me she had a team retreat in Eugene, some bonding session for new hires. It's going to be exhausting, she said, yawning for effect. We'll be offsite all day. I probably won't be home until late tomorrow. She even packed an overnight bag. Kissed my cheek. I almost believed her. But something in my gut itched. Not in a paranoid way, no frantic pacing or worst-case spirals. Just a quiet, steady unease that had grown louder every day since the party. So I lied. Said I had an out-of-town deposition, packed a briefcase, and left like normal. Then I doubled back. I parked 2 blocks over, near the trailhead, and walked to the house through the greenbelt. Took the side path. The one Rory and I used to walk every Sunday. As I got closer, I saw it, an unfamiliar silver Audi parked just off the curb. Sleek. Clean. Front plate with an out-of-state tag. I didn't need to guess. Shane. His name hit harder than I expected. Up until now, he'd been a suggestion, a collection of suspicious mentions, a face I'd seen through a room full of strangers. But now his car was here, in front of my house, like a flag staked into my life. I kept walking. My palms were damp, heartbeat in my ears. But I forced myself toward the window on the side of the house, the one partially covered by a sheer curtain Valerie never thought to close. I had never stood here like this before, never even thought about it. And then I saw them. Her back was to me, that familiar curve of her shoulder, hair tied up in a way I hadn't seen in years, casual, a little messy, like she didn't care how it looked. Or maybe because she did, just not for me. She was straddling him. Valerie, my wife, knees on the couch cushions, hands on his shoulders, laughing, laughing. Shane's head was tilted back, eyes half closed, mouth open in this ridiculous smile like he'd just won something. His hands were on her waist. No rush, no urgency, just comfort, familiarity, like they'd done this before. I felt my body go still, completely, chillingly still. No anger, no instinct to barge in, just stillness, the kind that freezes everything. My breath caught in my chest. It felt like I was watching someone else's life, some scene from a slow-burning film, unfolding in silence, framed by curtain and glass. She kissed his neck. He said something I couldn't hear. She laughed again. I stood there for minutes. I don't know how many. Could have been 5. Could have been 20. I kept waiting for something. Maybe for her to stop, for him to leave, for this whole thing to break apart like a bad dream, but it didn't. They stayed there, comfortable, like home. That was what broke me, I think. The ease of it. There was no guilt in her posture, no hesitation in his touch. They didn't move like people making a mistake. They moved like people continuing something that had long since become second nature. Eventually, I turned and walked away. My legs moved without instruction, numb and mechanical, like I was being pulled by a magnet away from the truth I'd just seen. I didn't cry. Not then. I didn't scream. I didn't kick Shane's car door or pound on the glass. I just left, because I knew there was nothing to salvage in that moment. No confrontation would give me clarity. No outburst would make her loyal. And the man I had been, the one who still believed in maybe it's not what it looks like, that man died at that window. I drove for hours, past the city line, up through the hills. I stopped at a pull-off overlooking a ridge I hadn't visited in years. Sat on the hood of my car. Let the wind bite at my sleeves. I stared out over the landscape, trying to remember how it felt to trust someone so completely that you'd never think to check behind them. All I could feel now was the emptiness of knowing exactly where I stood, and who I was standing alone without. I thought about our first apartment. The night Valerie cooked chicken Alfredo and accidentally burned the sauce. How we ordered Thai food instead and danced in the kitchen with chopsticks. I thought about the road trip to Coeur d'Alene, the sunrise hike, the song she used to hum when she thought no one could hear. I wondered if she still hummed it for him. That thought nearly buckled me. When I got back to the house, the Audi was gone. Valerie wasn't home. Her overnight bag was still in the foyer, untouched. The couch cushion was dented. I walked past the living room without stopping. Upstairs, our bed was made. Our bedroom smelled like her perfume, the new one, strong and unfamiliar. I lay down fully dressed, shoes on, hands crossed over my chest like I was in a coffin. I stared at the ceiling until the lines blurred. I didn't sleep. At some point during the early morning hours, she came home. I heard her close the door softly. I heard her sigh, heard her move through the kitchen, heard the rustle of her coat as she hung it up. She didn't check on me. She didn't climb into bed. She went to the guest room. The next morning, we acted like it never happened. She asked if I wanted coffee. I said no. She left early. I stayed in the doorway watching her drive away. Something had broken. Not a sharp snap. More like the slow, quiet tear of fabric coming apart, thread by thread, until all that remained was a shape you used to recognize. I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. I didn't call my sister. I didn't vent to my best friend. I didn't text old college buddies or Google, What to do when your wife cheats. I simply shut down the part of me that wanted answers, because I had them now. Every suspicion had been confirmed. Every look, every lie, every cold shoulder. All of it had pointed to this moment, and it was worse than I thought. Not because of what she did, but because of how natural she was doing it. How easy it looked. Like she'd already left me long before I found her body in another man's arms. I didn't leave her. Not yet. After I caught them, after I watched my wife straddling another man in my living room, I didn't scream or pack a bag or demand answers. I didn't even bring it up. I simply shifted. There's a quiet kind of rage. Not the shouting, dish-throwing kind that makes for dramatic movies. I'm talking about the kind that freezes your blood and sharpens your thoughts. A kind that organizes pain into categories and strategy. That was the version of me that woke up after that day. Calm, unreadable, dangerous in a way I didn't even recognize at first. And Valerie never noticed the change. Or if she did, she mistook it for detachment. A man withdrawing because the marriage was naturally winding down. She saw my silence as confirmation that she'd already won, that I was slowly fading into irrelevance so she could rewrite the ending as something mutual. Clean, sanitized. But I wasn't detaching. I was preparing. Started small. I rented a one-bedroom apartment in Hillsborough. 3rd floor. No frills. Month-to-month lease. I told the landlord I was a consultant passing through on a long-term project. Paid cash for the deposit. The building was quiet, mostly traveling nurses and grad students. I moved in a few things. A mattress, a desk, a lamp, a folding chair, my old keyboard. I left the rest of my life exactly where Valerie expected it, at home. Every night for a week, I returned to our house before she did. Sat on the couch. Pretended to work. Let her walk in and see me like nothing had changed. I made casual conversation. Asked about her client dinners. She lied effortlessly. I nodded. Smiled even. I learned how to match her performance. She would sit across from me at the table, texting under the edge of her phone case, thumb flicking rapidly across the screen. I stopped asking who. Stopped caring about her answers. Because the truth was, I had already started creating my way out. I just didn't want her to see it coming. The core of my plan came from something I'd shelved months ago. A side project I dabbled with during pandemic downtime, an app called NovaTrack, originally pitched as a secure data logging system for small businesses. A privacy-first cybersecurity suite designed to give freelancers control over their own digital footprint. I'd written maybe 40% of the back end before life got busy and it faded into the drawer of good ideas that go nowhere. But now it had a purpose. I pulled it back out and reworked the concept entirely. I tightened the code, added features, polished the front-end interface. Instead of just digital rights, it now included end-to-end encryption tools, serverless deployment paths, and a logging protocol that made third-party intrusions virtually impossible. It became more than an app. It became an escape hatch. Every night after Valerie fell asleep, or said she was going to bed early, I'd slip out the back, drive to Hillsborough, and work, sometimes till 2 or 3 in the morning. I felt alive for the first time in months. Not happy, not healed, but focused. Each line of code was a brick in the wall I was building between me and the life she had poisoned. While I worked, I took steps. I created a shell LLC in Delaware. Transferred ownership of NovaTrack to a family trust under a name she wouldn't recognize. I opened a business checking account and moved $42,000 from my personal savings. Not all at once. Never more than $4,999 in a single transfer. I hired a small firm out of Bend to act as legal custodians. On paper, I was a ghost. I also opened a second phone line. Just data. Used it only from the Hillsborough apartment. I bought a used MacBook off Craigslist, wiped it clean, and made that my NovaTrack machine. No personal logins. No passwords recycled. I ran everything through a VPN and encrypted email. By the time 2 months had passed, I had fully separated my digital identity from the one Valerie knew. At home, I played the part. She seemed happier lately, more confident. She even started humming again, new melodies, ones I didn't recognize. She went to yoga twice a week, started dressing differently. Some days, she'd ask if I was okay, like she wanted me to say no, like she needed to hear me say I missed her. I never gave her that. Yeah, just busy with work, I'd say. That was always enough. One night in late April, she sat on the patio reading a book while I grilled salmon. It was warm out, and the sky was that soft watercolor blue you only get in Oregon before summer fully commits. She looked peaceful, at ease. Her wine glass was nearly empty, and when I asked if she wanted another, she said, "Sure, thanks, babe." She hadn't called me that in months. I refilled her glass, watched her smile at her phone when it buzzed. Later, while she was in the shower, I sat at my desk and wrote an internal memo to myself, titled it, "Final Conditions for Exit." It read, Novitrack ownership confirmed, white EV checkmark. Funds fully relocated, white EV checkmark. Legal protection in place, white EV checkmark. Apartment secured, white EV checkmark. Emotional detachment confirmed, white EV checkmark. I stared at that last line for a long time, because that was the hardest part to define, not just being angry, not just being disappointed, but being done. Was I done? I thought about the man she had straddled on our couch. Yes, I was done. I kept my routine steady for 3 more weeks, just long enough to finish testing Novitrack's latest patch and finalize the trust paperwork. I looped in a friend of a friend to create a digital launch strategy with fake founders and PR stubs so that nothing would trace back to me until I wanted it to. When Novitrack finally went live, it would look like the product of a team from somewhere in Chicago, not a burned-out husband in Oregon. I started removing my fingerprints from the house. I stopped syncing my calendar to the family iPad. Canceled a few subscriptions I knew she never used. Quiet things. Things you wouldn't notice if you weren't looking, but enough that the future I was exiting would leave no doors open behind me. Then one morning, as I was leaving the house, Valerie asked, "Do you ever think we should take a break?" I stopped at the doorway, looked back. Her voice was soft, casual, like she was suggesting we get Thai instead of Italian. "A break. Just to clear our heads," she said, shrugging. "Things feel stuck." I let a beat pass. 2. Maybe, I said. She nodded. "It doesn't have to mean anything permanent." I smiled faintly. "I know. But the truth was I had already left. I just hadn't told her yet. 3 months. That's how long it took to make my exit watertight. Not emotionally, I'd already walked away from Valerie long before that. No, this was about logistics, ownership, and protection. About making sure that when the dust eventually settled, there'd be nothing left for her to reach for. No handles. No leverage. Just locked doors. By mid-May, everything was in place. Novitrack was fully live, quietly, anonymously, and already picking up attention on a few developer forums. A few early adopters posted reviews calling it disruptive and impossibly clean. That part felt strange, watching something I built in a haze of betrayal take on a life of its own. Strange, but good. The Delaware Trust held full control of the company now. On paper, Novitrack was owned by a holding firm called Lamar Group LLC, managed by a trustee I'd never met in person. The only direct connection to me was a one-time digital signature on a contract routed through 4 different encrypted sign-off layers. Even if someone tried to trace it, they'd need court orders in 3 states. And they'd still come up empty. My savings? Gone from our shared accounts. Everything Valerie could once access had been drained, moved, and rewritten in my name only. A new credit union. 2 new investment portfolios. A crypto wallet I'd buried behind an alias. I didn't do it out of spite. I did it because I'd spent a year believing she was on my side. I wasn't going to let myself be that careless again. I waited for the right window to leave. Valerie had a weekend conference in Seattle. Client onboarding, she said. That phrase again. Always vague, always useful. She left Friday afternoon in a blur of high heels and suitcase wheels, barely kissing me goodbye. By the time she reached I-5 North, I was already halfway done. I'd hired movers, quiet ones. No big truck, no noise. Just 2 guys from a Craigslist ad I vetted with fake names and cash up front. I had already boxed up what I needed: my guitars, my clothes, my journals, legal docs, Rory's old toys I couldn't part with. Everything fit into the back of a rental van. It took less than 4 hours. By nightfall, the house looked untouched from the outside. But inside, it was hollow. My office was stripped bare. My side of the closet empty. Bathroom drawers? Just hers. I even wiped my browsing history and deactivated every smart device. Left the Nest thermostat blinking dumb and disconnected. No trace. Just echoes. The last thing I did was change the locks. I had a locksmith waiting around the corner. He showed up at 9 p.m. sharp. No questions, just did the job, then left. I stood in the driveway for a long time after he pulled away, holding the new keys in my hand. Then I dropped them in the mailbox. That was the message. When Valerie came back, she'd find her house intact, but the door would no longer open to the life she remembered. That night, I checked into a short-term rental in Austin. Different state, different air, different everything. The apartment was nothing special, 2 bedrooms, a view of the highway, but it had clean light and fast internet. That was enough. I sat on the floor with a bottle of water, opened my laptop, and watched Novatrack's traffic surge in real time. We'd just been featured in a newsletter with 12,000 subscribers. I felt nothing. Not joy. Not relief. Just the strange peace that comes when you've followed through with something most people only fantasize about. I had done it. I had removed myself from a life someone else had corrupted, and I hadn't burned anything down. I hadn't shouted. I hadn't begged. I just left. The email went out Monday morning. Subject line, regarding my decision. I kept it short. Valerie. By the time you read this, I'll be gone. This isn't an emotional choice. It's not revenge. It's a boundary. I've spent the last several months preparing for this, and I won't be returning. There will be no follow-up, no meeting, no closure. Please direct any legal correspondence to the firm listed below. I wish you the best in whatever life you build next. Grayson. Attached was contact info for my lawyer and a full property rights agreement. The house was hers. I didn't want it. I had already signed away any stake in it just to make it clean. Her first response came within the hour. Grayson. What is this? Where are you? Can we talk? I don't understand. Please don't do this. I didn't answer. Her second message was longer. Angrier. You don't get to disappear like this. We should have talked. This isn't how adults handle things. What am I supposed to tell people? What am I supposed to do? Again, I didn't reply. By day 3, her tone had shifted again. Okay, if you need space, fine. Let's just take a break. We'll work through it. I know we haven't been okay. I'm willing to try if you are. That was when I blocked her number. I wasn't playing a game. I wasn't making a point. I had simply moved on. Weeks passed. Valerie reached out to my parents. They didn't answer. I'd told them everything 2 weeks earlier. My sister told her politely that I was unavailable. My old colleagues only knew that I had taken a sabbatical to work on a startup. No one knew where I was. Shane? I have no idea how he reacted. Maybe she told him I ghosted her. Maybe he moved in the day after I left. Maybe he got scared when the fantasy collapsed into real life. All I know is that she never mentioned him in any of her emails. It was like she couldn't admit it even to herself that I had seen them. That her secret had been visible through a single careless curtain. There's a strange kind of power in silence, in never giving someone the performance they expect. She wanted a fight or a dramatic conversation or maybe even an apology from me for not being enough. Instead, I left her with blank space. And that space said everything she refused to. I rebuilt quietly. Took a teaching position as a guest lecturer at a tech school in Austin. Rented a better place. Hired a small dev team. By the end of July, Novatrack was in beta testing across 5 countries. It made its way into a security thread on Hacker News. I got an email from someone at Cisco asking if I'd ever consider licensing. I smiled. Not because I needed validation, but because none of it had her fingerprints on it. She hadn't built it. She hadn't encouraged it. She hadn't even known about it. This life, this version of me, it belonged entirely to me. No shared bank account. No shared secrets. Just a man who walked away from the wreckage of a story someone else tried to rewrite without his permission. It took 6 months for Valerie to try and claw her way back in. By then, Novatrack was everywhere, mentioned in Forbes, demoed at DEF CON. That's when her name reappeared, this time in legal filings. Her attorney argued that she had contributed emotional labor to my success. Claimed the app had been conceived during the marriage, implying entitlement. My team was ready. We produced timestamped commits, financial records, and the LLC trail, all signed, sealed, dated. We even linked attempted logins from Artwell Consulting's IP, tying back to her desperation to access my code. The judge didn't even flinch. Case dismissed. Valerie was ordered to pay damages plus legal fees. She walked out of the courthouse pale and quiet. Her story collapsed the same way our marriage had, quietly, completely, and without a single word from me. A letter arrived 3 months later. Handwritten. No return address. Inside were soft apologies and scribbled memories, our first dog, rainy mornings, nicknames long retired. She wrote, "I didn't mourn you. I mourned the life I thought we'd have." I never opened it past the first few lines. By then, I was living in Austin full-time, speaking at tech conferences, running NovaTrack from a clean, glass-walled office I designed myself. The man she once knew, the one who waited for her to come home, who smiled through silence, no longer existed. What remained was a version rebuilt in solitude, forged not from bitterness, but from clarity. I didn't need revenge. I needed peace, and that's exactly what I built without her.